What up, everyone? It's your boy Soju here on behalf of the Straight Chillin' Podcast, where we do weekly horror movie reviews. Today, I'm going to be doing another video game review, and this time it's going to be for Playdead Studios' Limbo from 2010. Now, to start things off, I would like to say that I would recommend playing through this game. It's a fun little side-scroller platformer puzzle game if that's what you're into, and I definitely think it would be good for kids maybe getting into the horror genre as far as gaming goes. But before we get too far into it, let me go ahead and drop that spoiler warning.
Spoiler warning.
So starting off with the positives, I'd like to say the art design and the aesthetic works really well for this game. For a game called Limbo, having this idea of only using blacks, whites, and grays, there's absolutely no color, but it works really well for this game. It helps create this really beautiful yet creepy and ominous kind of world. Some of the things like the spider comes to mind. You have this big giant boss spider, and even though it's just this outline, the shadow of a creature, it's got these fine details too. You can see the little hairs that kind of come off of it, and the outline of its eyes, and that just, it works really well. And I'm a sucker for simple ideas that are really kind of pulled off well, and I think this game utilizes that. And building off of that a little bit, the backgrounds that you see for this are really well designed as well, and kind of helps build around like the lore around the story and stuff like that. So you start off you have the forest, and you can kind of see the little blades of grass sometimes when you're walking through, and sometimes the music just completely drops out and it's just really dark and kind of creepy, and you can hear yourself walking through the grass, and that background just builds really nice. And then it goes into this kind of factory world, and you have different like rooftop areas and stuff like that. And so the overall just look of this game is pretty great, and was one of my favorite things about it. It just made it really enjoyable to look at and to play through, and I really appreciated that, especially for such a simple idea. The mechanics and the physics in this game work really well. So in January, I reviewed a similar game, Little Nightmares, another kind of platformer puzzle game. And one of my biggest beefs about that game was it was the jumps, and completing certain obstacles felt like it was hindered by the mechanics and the physics, and it was the exact opposite in this game. I felt like I never failed a puzzle because I couldn't quite gauge how far to jump or how quickly the character moved. All that worked out really well, and on top of that, just the kind of variety of obstacles that this game provides you for such a simple kind of side-scroller game. It does offer a ton of variety as far as things that you have to complete, and different mechanics, things like gravity and kind of moving upside down, and your typical pits and stuff like that. But then you also have like the worms that make you only walk in one direction, and you only have jump and grab and kind of, the climb button. That's really all you have to work with. And even with that, I thought the obstacles were really well designed. The puzzles worked really well. It never felt too complicated. Like there was never a puzzle where I spent 30 minutes trying to figure it out. But at the same time, each one seemed to kind of maybe build off an earlier idea or offer a completely new mechanic that I had to kind of take a little time to figure out. And I really appreciated that, even to the point where there were like machine guns at one point, which still worked for the aesthetic of this game and the puzzles. I don't know. I thought that was really well done. And even some of the ones, there was this kind of like minecart area where you have to kind of go through the dark and you're on a minecart, and that kind of reminded me a little bit of like some old school like Donkey Kong and stuff like that. So there was even a little bit of nostalgia thrown in there, inspiration from some older side scroller games. So something that cracked me up during my playthrough that I didn't realize about this game is it's surprisingly brutal. So when your character dies, he dies brutal deaths every time. And since there's so much variety in the obstacles of this game, that means there's a ton of variety as far as death goes. So there are like bear traps and, like I said, machine guns, getting smashed, falling in pits and drowning, all kind of things. And every time it's just always kind of surprisingly brutal to me, but at the same time, since it's such a simple game, it's also kind of funny. It kind of cracked me up every time this kid would die, and sometimes I would find myself like purposefully like throwing this kid into like a meat grinder or something like that just to see the kind of graphics they throw at you as far as the death goes. And finally, for the positives, the sound design. I really like the sound design. It's didn't offer a whole lot of variety, but it was utilized really well. So sometimes, like with different backgrounds or different areas, it would get this really intense music that would like kind of really get your blood pumping, and it worked really well for the puzzles at the time. Maybe the backgrounds, like the industrial kind of look, but sometimes too it would completely drop out or just be really subtle. Low noise, and you could hear yourself like walking through the forest and your feet like moving through the blades of grass and stuff like that. So it worked really well with the aesthetic of this game as well. They kind of go hand in hand, and I thought that was really well done as well. Now let's get into some of the negatives. This game is really short. So doing my playthrough for the month, having never played this game, never watched any kind of gameplay or walkthrough, it took me a little less, I think, than 3 hours. It was about 3 playthroughs. And I usually stopped around 55 minutes. So it was really, really short, even with no experience. When I went back and did it for my no commentary playthrough, I think I was able to beat it in a little over an hour, maybe somewhere around an hour and a half. And I think I could even cut that down. So, this game is really short. There's no kind of DLC. There are some collectibles that I looked into, and you can do like there are eggs that you can collect, and they open up this kind of secret area that's already worked in within the game. It's just kind of like underground. So it offers this little kind of bonus area, and and it's just kind of like a really hard area. So it doesn't add to any kind of story or anything. It's just a couple new puzzles that are really difficult to complete. So there's not, I don't know if there's a whole lot of replayability in this game. I've beat it twice now, and I don't know if I'll ever go back to it, or if I do, I feel like it'll be a while before and it probably will be more for like the aesthetic or just kind of going through the first little area. Because another one of my negatives is there is a serious lack of boss battles in this game, and it kind of surprised me because the first area in this game is the forest, and it works really well. You have this spider, and it gives off this creepy vibe, and you end the first kind of area by beating the spider and then ultimately like ripping it apart, which was really cool. And it's strange that it feels like that's the beginning of the game because it kind of sets up your expectations, and they never really deliver on that again. There's nothing else quite like the spider that you have to go through. It just seems like you kind of go through these different areas of puzzles without any kind of serious boss battles, and that was a like real big disappointment for me. So I think they definitely should have worked in more boss battles. I mentioned that I really liked the backgrounds of this game, and I felt like they should have added more variety to that as well. You have the forest that starts off really well. It develops into this kind of industrial area, and at one point they're like little things that kind of hint at some kind of story or lore. There's this giant hotel sign that you have to get through, which is really cool, but they didn't offer a whole lot of variety. Once you kind of go into the industrial area, it kind of stays like that, and it's kind of bleak as opposed to the way the forest area looked and felt. And so I feel like they should have tried to develop that a little bit more, some variety in the backgrounds and the areas, and maybe that could have even helped and maybe a little bit of variety in like the puzzles and stuff like that. I don't know what's up with these short games either, but the no manual save drives me crazy. Like as a gamer, it's just I want to be able to stop and to manually like stop the game and to know I'm going to restart in a certain area. This was a similar problem to Little Nightmares. You simply couldn't choose when you wanted to save, and so I was always kind of paranoid or unsure, like, is my game saved? Am I going to be able to restart back at this point? And this game didn't even really have any kind of indicators, like any kind of circle spinning or anything to let me know, like, yeah, the game has saved and it's okay for you to stop. I don't know why that's a consistent problem, but I don't know. It kind of drives me nuts. It just makes me paranoid. And finally, there's not really any kind of story in this game, and it's really short, and you get like hints of things, but there's absolutely no kind of dialogue and there's no kind of characters. There are hints, and I've looked at things online once I finished the game because I was really intrigued by it, but it's essentially just a boy looking for his sister in what's called Limbo. But even if the game wasn't called Limbo, I don't know if I would just pick up on that. So there are things to kind of look into as far as the lore and all kind of symbolism and stuff like that. But as far as a straightforward story, like this is the beginning, middle, and end, or any kind of arc, there's not really any of that. And I felt like there was a lot of potential to maybe add some lore, especially with the game called Limbo that's got such, I think, like it's got so much weight behind the name. I think you could have done so much with a story, and there just wasn't any kind of story really at all. So that was a little bit of a disappointment for me. So let's go ahead and get into the final score.
Overall, I'm going to give this game a 4 out of 5. I thought it was really beautifully designed, and I had a lot of fun playing through it, even though it was pretty short. If you're interested, I have a ton of Limbo gameplay right here on our YouTube page. And if you're interested in more horror gaming, definitely check us out on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/straightchillingpodcast. If you've played through this game, let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, until next time, everyone, please don't forget to keep chilling.